If you're watching this after the fact, make sure and check the description on YouTube for all the time codes. These streams tend to be about 2 hours long, and we're going to take a few minutes here to get started. So make sure you're checking the description to be able to skip around. I'll say some hellos to start. So hello to David, DCD. Thanks again, as always, for doing the time codes. Let me pause the video streams. Looks like everything's going okay. Twitch audio okay. Thanks, David. Hello, Mr. Certainly. Good afternoon to you all you wonderful snorkelers, scuba divers, and makers. It's not going to be as deep of a dive as last week was. Last week was pretty intense. Hi, Johnny. YouTube okay? Thank you. It's interesting. Spook's like not even in the sun. The sun's behind him. Hey, Doctor. Hi, Hugo. Hi, Gary. Doctor again. I don't think we're going to get deep, super deep unless people ask questions, but made a lot of progress. Lots of progress to talk about. Maybe I'll just ping Lady at her right now. Oh, she's not away. I'm everywhere. Hey, Dexter. Yes, progress is really good. I think I might actually be able to... Well, no, I take that back. I'm pretty busy next week. I was going to say I could like revisit the BLE stuff, but I don't think that's actually going to be the case. Next week is PyCon. I have a question about F strings. How much flash does that really take? I don't know. You'd have to try it. I didn't add it, so I don't know. I don't remember. You could maybe find the pull request that added it, and it would tell you, but... PT drops in the chat. Hug report to me and Jeff for helping for all the merging. Yeah, they've got a meeting at 5:30 Eastern, so... I never make that meeting, but they record it, so I watch it after the fact. Johnny's working at 11 on a Friday night. Oh, that's a bummer. Hopefully you don't have to work this weekend as well. Charles. Maybe from the deeps of the ocean. Hey, kmatch. I want to talk about what kmatch is doing, because kmatch has been doing some awesome stuff. Dexter had a pull request that got merged this week. Congrats. Doctor says, I'm disassembling a loft bed and trying not to die in the process. It sounds like you might need a second person to help you with that. Mr. Certainly's been revisiting their audio setup and was able to get a Go XLR on the cheap, so now redoing my mics and whatnot. Nice. Johnny says, I had to fire a consultant and now do the job themselves. Bah. Oh, that's a bummer. Working late at night is no fun. I kind of like end early. Although I got up early today. Today was cleaner day, so got up early and actually got right to it. I was doing poking the merges, and then it's 4:09, so I'll clap. And the clap is at 4:11 by my time code. We just do this to make sure we sync stuff up. Okay, let's get going into housekeeping. Actually, first, we have a Adafruit jobs question. Are jobs at Adafruit on a particular page, or would they be on jobs.adafruit.com along with not at Adafruit jobs? So almost exclusively, jobs at Adafruit are hired from referrals. For people that work in New York proper, they're done through referrals. I think that's almost entirely true. If there's ever a job, like there have been times where we needed like a PHP person in New York, If they can't find them through referrals, they'll actually talk about them on the shows. So just keep an eye out for Ask an Engineer and stuff. But for folks like me who are remote and technically in our contractors, we tend to hire people based on the work that they're doing in our community already, and also show and tell. Show and tell is a great way to get on Phil and Lamore's radar as well. Had all the weather today. Sun, rain, hail, only missing snow for the win. And Phil's in the chat and says you can always just email Phil with your resume. If you are in New York and looking for work, they have started hiring people. So you can email PT with your resume, which is pt@adafruit.com. And that's kind of how I got hired. I was on show and tell, and I was showing off the drone stuff I was doing. And to have it blogged up, I emailed PT. And then later, when I went back on show and tell and said, hey, I'm looking for a job, PT emailed me and said, hey, are you interested? So that worked out really well. Okay, let's do housekeeping. Just being active and impressive is one of the best things. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. For when it comes to the remote stuff. Yeah. So typically with the remote folks, like, and this is true for me as well, we don't hire them kind of perpetually from the start. What we do is they do it like project by project basis. And that's true for Learn Guides as well, is that you'll do like, you'll pay per guide sorts of stuff. So the first project that I was given was get MicroPython running on this AMD chips, it's AMD 21s. And I was super excited and I did it really quickly. It's just like, it was a perfect fit. It still is a perfect fit for what I've done. Okay, I gotta stop looking at my video. All right, let me pull up housekeeping. So hello everyone. My name is Scott and I work on CircuitPython for Adafruit. This is a deep dive. Actually, let me go back. I usually do it in different order. Adafruit is an open source hardware and software company based out of New York City. I work in Seattle, so I work remotely for them as a contractor. I work on CircuitPython, as I said before, which is a version of Python designed for inexpensive computers called microcontrollers. Here's an example of one for those who want to see. This is a Raspberry Pi Pico board, and it's got a microcontroller on there that runs CircuitPython. So you just plug it into the USB, and you get a drive with Python code on it that you edit. This is a deep dive. So I do this 2 p.m. on Fridays usually, although I'll shift it to Thursday if I want to take Fridays off. 2 p.m. because I'm in Seattle, so that's 5 p.m. Eastern. Typically goes for 2 hours or more. So as you've probably seen already, I take questions and chat with the chat. So if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. It can be related to what I'm doing or not related to what I'm doing. It's not that big of a deal. I feel like I'm like not centered. Let me just. It's very. The whole thing is very. It is very casual. Casual is the right word for it. So yeah, questions are welcome. If you want to chat with me and others outside of the stream environment, you can go to the Adafruit Discord server by going to the URL adafru.it/discord. That's what the smaller box here is the Discord. There's a bug on the Discord side that makes everybody an object, so it doesn't seem like the stream kit overlay that I'm using is actually used very often, so that's a bummer. We do have time codes. Thanks to David for taking time codes. They'll go in the YouTube description at the end so people can skip around. And last up, this is Spook in the smaller camera here. That's cat cam. Spook is epileptic, which means he has seizures from time to time, although he's been doing really, really well. So I wouldn't expect him to have one, but I just want you to be aware of if I'm on camera, but things are muted and I'm not paying attention, that's why I'm just making sure he's okay. I don't expect that to happen, but that's it's always a possibility. Okay, so that's housekeeping. I didn't say next week is on. It looks like Friday will work as well. So let's talk about what I'm doing next week first, I guess. I guess that's where I'll start. Just checking the chat. So PyCon is next week. So there's that. Python.org. I don't know the details because I haven't looked at it. It is virtual. So I know that talks are during the middle of the week, I think. So 14th and 15th. Which I guess is the end of the week. Let me secretly... yeah, so talks are Friday, Saturday. And then the Python Language Summit, which I'm also going to, and I've gone to the last couple years, is a private... So usually the way PyCon works is that it's kind of a week-long event where the talks are like a couple days out of that, but then there's smaller summits, because usually people are in the same location. There are other summits like an education summit, a language summit, that kind of overlap with a broader week, and then there's like sprints and things that go along with that as well. So I'm going to the Python Language Summit, which is like 2 4-hour chunks on Tuesday and Wednesday, and I'm actually giving a lightning talk. I'm one of the pre-selected lightning talks. So I've started the slides, but what I'll plan on doing is I'll talk kind of post Language Summit next week about how that went, and I'll show you the talk. The talk I'm doing is talking about how CircuitPython is a subset of CPython, meant to give them some context, the CPython developers some context about like what perspective we have as like a subset of CPython. So I've got that started, and I'll go into more details next week. But that's one of the reasons I'm busy. The merge stuff is almost done, so I'm having a meeting with Damien and Jim next week as well. Right after the language summit, I'm going to be chatting with them. A lightning talk is a 5-minute talk, so it's very quick. Let's see. I'm a cat. So Fridays are off during the winter for skiing. What is it in the summer? Chilling on the beach? Do they have those in Washington? Yeah, we definitely have beaches. They're not particularly warm. But I think if we get out and like go camping or something, that might be the case. Hi, Hams Lab. Things are going great here. Hope things are good with you. Yep. So that's happening, which is exciting. I have yet to look through the talks, but I do have a ticket. So here, this is the schedule shows tutorials, talks, posters, events, and summits, and keynote speakers. So I'll be paying attention to that as well. So I'll probably be pretty distracted next week. But yeah, there's some interesting stuff on the language summit. Oh, you can't see it. Here we go. Gareth says, invite Damien to join us on one time. Would be great to hear him and you chat. Yeah, I'll ask him about it. Now's not a great time because he's 7 hours behind. So it's like what, 7 a.m. there right now. So there is some time zone stuff that make it a little bit trickier. But I'll offer it to him. If you want to get the way that I keep track of what Damien's doing besides chatting with him sporadically is there's a Melbourne MicroPython meetup that posts videos. And they just posted oh, I missed it. It's okay. Hi, Alfred. Yeah, so there's this Melbourne MicroPython meetup that has links to videos from the meetup. And that's a really good way. Matt Trentini, who runs it, always does like a slide presentations of kind of like all the hardware that he's keeping track of, which is also really interesting. And then there's usually also, so like this is April's, and I've already watched these. So here's Matt talking about all these MicroPython-y things, and then and then Damien talks about the 115 release. And so, yeah, you can just see here, like, sponsor MicroPython, seasons of docs, new hardware, porting efforts, infrastructure. There is actually a slide on here about me too, about the merge, and links to the deep dive. So we're getting all referential here. So yeah, next week looks to be a pretty busy week. It'll probably be kind of like a bunch of odds and ends. So let's talk merge. I guess that's where I'm taking this. It's all kind of whatever I want to do. So the merge request, so 112 is in. I can't remember where we were last week. But we have the merge request for the pull request for MicroPython 113 is out. I've addressed feedback from Dan, although Dan's on vacation this weekend. So I was hoping Jeff would review it as well, but I'm not sure. So 113 is like, it's passing CI, which is good. And so it's close. It'll be in soon, and this has so MPY is already merged in. All the MPY changes are merged in, and Jeff did a merge. There's a character at the start of MPY files that it uses to make sure, or try to make sure that it's actually an MPY file. And that character for MicroPython is M, and Jeff just did a thing to make it C for CircuitPython. So that should make it easier for us to like not conflict with MicroPython's MPY files. And one thing we thought about doing was actually changing them to CPy files, but that might be more confusing because CPython creates PyC files. So anyway, at least there's an error message now that will tell you like, this is the doing that. Oh, that's why he hasn't been reacting to the PySerial stuff. Oh, David G says they should improve the setting, maybe grabbing the screen they use in the Melbourne meetup. So the video in the April one is actually better. So it transitions between the slides and the camera now. Oh, Nerodox talking about Dan being on vacation. Yeah, he's just out today through Tuesday off and on. He's visiting like his wife's family because they're all vaccinated. David says, does Adafruit maintain a count of the collected time from their paid work on CircuitPython core? No. It's a lot. I mean, I've been working 40 hours a week plus for years on it. Plus Dan and Jeff's half time. Okay, so that's where we are in 113. So for those of you who are new to this, we're trying to go from 1.94 up through 115. 110, 11, and 12 are, you like this cup? 10, 11, 12 are already merged in. This is a Evergreen Bike Alliance. It's the Bavarian Bikes and Brews thing. It's some like mountain biking thing in the mountains here that I have never done, but we had friends do. So we went off and did that with them, I think, or something. Okay, so yeah, 10, 11, 12 are in. 13's almost done, which leaves 14 and 15. And I actually did 14 and 15 yesterday. I had been hoping that they would be easy because they're much smaller merges, and it turned out to be true. So I've done the bulk of the work. There's obviously some like refinement to do, but the merges, when I did the merges, as we last week we did the 113 merge, and we had like 250 files to go through, and when I did the files for 114 and 15, it was like under 50 a piece, so it was like quite quick to go through. So I actually have 14 here, and then I have 15, a merge 15 branch as well, which are just a start, and I've got to like update those once things get merged in. So that'll just take a bit of time. I'll take a bit of time to get in, but I think I'm basically through the merge now. I did fix the tests of 114 and 115, I think. So it's subject to change a little bit as I'll get those on the I'll get those based on the current version of the merge afterwards. So there's just a little like once 113 gets in, there'll be some work to get 114 kind of out the door and into a PR, and then once that's done, the same thing will be true for 115, and then we'll be up to date. One thing I did realize, and I don't know if I talked about this, but one of the things I was doing in the 111 and 12 merges is that I did the merge early, like I was overlapping the merges, but then I did cherry picks for the merge commit, trying to update them to like the latest version of CircuitPython. But when I did that, it turns out, and I didn't realize this until later, that that cherry picking process lost the history. It broke the Git history of things. So we incorporated all the changes, but we didn't actually have the history of what changes from MicroPython were included in that merge, which is a huge bummer. And I think actually part of the reason that 112 and 113 were so giant is that Git couldn't figure out that I had already merged some of the changes in. So I was kicking myself a lot on that, but it turns out, well, now that I'm aware of it, I can correct it, and I think that's another reason so 113, because 11 and 12 are merged into CircuitPython main, I didn't want to redo that stuff. It gets really complicated. Like fixing that would have been really complicated. So I'm not going to fix it, but 113 brings in all the history anyway. So that'll be good. It's like 1,800 commits. It's a lot of commits. So getting 113 in would be really good. And then 114 and 15, I'll just have to be careful to make sure that the merge commit's correct. But yeah, so that's pretty good. Is celebrating getting vaccinated like an I voted message? Because it also hurt those that could not yet. Yeah, so I think the challenge in the US, I understand that my audience is more international than that, but in the US, we're very privileged to have relatively early access to vaccinations. Like I have my first dose of Pfizer, I'm getting my second dose in a couple weeks. And so I understand that some folks watching may not be able to do that yet. But the US also has a problem of a lot of people who aren't going to get it, even though they can. They call it vaccine hesitancy. And so I want to be very forward with my expectations that people should get the vaccine if they can. And be forward about my experience getting the vaccine as a way to hopefully help people get over the hump of getting it. So I hope that everybody who's watching internationally can get it soon. But I'm not going to not talk about it because of that. Yeah, so Mr. Certainly says, I think not, David G. We need to bring acceptance that being vaccinated is an absolute major component for a return to normal. This is 2021. Celebrating via social media is an effective way to get the message out, sends the right message to those we care about. Yeah, and I've had friends, like, I have one friend who I had a long conversation about with, who is like definitely in that camp where he had COVID and so was like not planning on getting vaccinated and still like a bit concerned about it too. So I was pushing him to do it, and so I said, I'll let you know how it goes for me. Nice. Doctor's vaccinated. Johnny's scheduled for Wednesday. Hamslab says, my take is it's irresponsible to not get it unless you have a medical reason not to. I agree with you with that. Alvaro says, we're way behind in Costa Rica. I assume that's a Costa Rica flag. I know you're there, though. Yeah. My dad got his too, and that's it. But we were happy to know that when other people in other places get it, it should be celebrated. It does not affect us in any way. Oof. Alvaro says they have Indian numbers there as well. Oh, that's rough. Yeah, my parents did get it before me too, so they've been fully vaccinated like a month or two now, because my mom is almost 70, so they're older. But yeah, we're pushing more in the U.S. to get vaccines more abroad, so I hope that works out. Hugo points out that John Oliver on Last Week Tonight had a good segment about vaccines this weekend, like last weekend. Alfred, who says, I've also gotten both my Pfizer shots, says, I haven't used CircuitPython too much, so for a newbie, what's the advantage of using it? I think it depends a bit on what your experience, where you're coming from is. But the goal with CircuitPython is to be very easy to get started with and very quick to iterate with. So you take a CircuitPython device, you usually double click it to get into the bootloader and load CircuitPython on it. And then it will come back up as a CircuitPy drive. And then on that drive will be a code.py file, which you just edit and it automatically reloads when you save it. Which makes it really quick to iterate on things. So we're definitely like trying to make it real quick to get started, and we also are trying to make it really simple to do things. Bruce S says, I got my first dose of Moderna about a month ago, and in Canada we're getting everyone one shot before moving on to the second shots. So Alfred, hopefully that answered your question about CircuitPython. I think we do provide a lot of good stuff, like with the deep sleep stuff, like because we are operating at this like higher level of abstraction, it allows us to do some things on your behalf that are really nice. Piotograph. To say for myself, one of the reasons is because I'm a Python newbie. Yeah, CircuitPython is very true to CPython. CPython is like desktop Python. So it's a great place to start. The place to start, I think, for CircuitPython is there's a CircuitPython essentials guide. And this is just a really good overview. It's not an overview of Python. So if you don't have the Python background, it might not be the best. But it is a good overview of like all of the hardware-y things that you can do with CircuitPython. Yes. Last Week Tonight is definitely for adults. Thanks, Mr. Shirtley, for giving folks the heads up. Alfred says, I did remember that part being pretty easy. Does it does it have a lot of overhead? Specifically thinking of running it on low power MCUs. So it has to be on 32-bit MCUs. And we are doing some stuff for low power. So we had ESP32S2 low power support, and we're also moving, NRF is checked in, I think. STM and RP2040 will have low power as well. Looks like we're getting an influx of people after the crowd supply teardown stream with Peter. I was watching the crowd supply teardown stream from Unexpected Maker and Dishipu, and Tiny Lead Matrix as well have joined. Welcome, folks. We're just chit-chatting. I don't have a bunch of merging to do, so we're not going to deep dive that. Yeah, the RP2040 is not a very low power chip, so I think Lady Ada was actually a bit surprised that we were going to do it, but I was like, so many people want it. I was like, let's just do it. So I think we will do that. Yeah, I assume the video on demand, the recording will be on the crowd supplies. Hi, Perdomo 501st. 501st. No stream crashing. You're all welcome. Gareth says, is the chip shortage going to get a lot worse, or am I just feeling paranoid? I'm not the right person to ask that question. That's what the other stream was pretty good for. I do feel like it's giving us a bit of breathing room on CircuitPython to actually spend more time on the software side, which is kind of exciting. Like, you know, a lot of the work that we do is high Folknology, crowd supply raid. Doctor says chip shortages probably will get worse before getting better. Sai says, I'm just doing the building and even some capacitors are out of stock. Ugh. Python classes for the RP2040 PIO. Yes, there are. We take a different approach than MicroPython because we just parse it. I'm on the wrong. Can you tell what I type in all day, every day, GitHub? I think it's, I don't, oh, you know, we have a separate learn guide for it. There's a learn guide for Pico PIO. Introduction to PIO with CircuitPython. This is what you want, Joel. Unexpected Maker says, gonna get much worse before it gets better, mid-2022 or later until it starts to improve, is the industry's speculation. Alvaro says, I'm stocking vacuum tubes, but that has nothing to do with the shortage. Yeah, and Alvaro points out that one of the great searches recently was finding a replacement chip for a chip that's out of stock. So, I do also know that, yeah, for us, it's actually quite nice. For me as a software person, like there's always going to be software work. But a lot of the work that I do is like bringing up new platforms, new chips. So it's nice that I have some time to not do that. And I'll show later. Oh, I tried to share the link to the crowd supply video. Maybe it was censored. Yeah, hopefully Mr. Certainly can take a look at that. He's a mod. So yeah, I'm kind of excited. Like I have plenty of stuff I want to work on still. So I think what you'll see is that like Lamore in terms of products is kind of going where she can buy stuff. So I was talking with the Pimaroni folks and we were talking about like a handhold and stuff, a handheld. And she's basically said like, I'm not doing anything with the screen right now because screens are impossible to get. So you'll see Adafruit's products kind of evolve. And we're also very happy that our in terms of microcontrollers that we run on, we have a very broad support. So even if some of them are out of stock, we'll be able to go towards the ones that are. So Indra asks, "Hey Scott, is it possible to scale CPU frequency dynamically? How the compiler handles it? Like if CPU frequency changes, then timing functions also change." So you're getting at what makes it hard. In CircuitPython, we don't support changing the CPU frequency at runtime. And that's because usually the clock that drives the CPU is also driving other stuff. And so if you had like a SPI running at a particular baud rate and then you changed the CPU frequency, we'd have to like recompute the divisor on the SPI peripheral. So it's something we thought about doing, but it's just got a lot of knock-on effects. It's not a simple thing to do, so we haven't added it. Charles says the issue for chip shortages is that the foundries do not have capacities to do the catch-up with demand. Screen manufacturers have the same problems. Yup. Awesome. And Mr. certainly posted the teardown session in the Discord if folks want to watch it. Yeah, Gareth says, as a software person, chip shortage means breathing space. As a hardware person, it's a nightmare. Yeah, it's true. But on the hardware side for Adafruit, we have a diverse enough portfolio of products that I don't think Lamore is that worried about it. But that's not my job. Not my job either. Okay. So we talked about merges. One other thing I wanted to point out is, so I have pending branches for 114 and 115. And then I also wanted to point out this this PR that I did, which is a Python helper tool for MicroPython merges. I don't think I showed this on this deep dive yet, but what it is it's just a Python file where after you do a merge, you run this and it basically undoes a lot of the Git stuff that we don't use from MicroPython. So like here's a list of the MicroPython ports and we just straight up don't use them. So we just remove them from our repo. So we do that, and then STM and NRF, we have to be a bit more particular because we share the folder names, which is unfortunate. But this undoes any changes we got from MicroPython and some other stuff that we delete. So I just wanted to point out that there's this as well. Industries with big pockets are buying everything up. Yeah, the comparison to toilet paper at the start of the pandemic seems pretty fitting to me. But yeah, you're going to continue to see some software changes. So that's where we are on the merge. Because the CI passed, I don't have much else to do on it. I'm waiting for review. Oh, let's highlight this. I spent hours undoing changes tonight. Thank God for Git. Yeah, I really like Git. Git is very handy. So kmatch was in the chat earlier, and I don't know if kmatch is around still. But kmatch has been a member of our community for a while, the CircuitPython community. And you've probably heard on this deep dive me talk about TinyLogicFriend, which is the idea of having a kind of a shared firmware for all the dev boards so that you can use them with sigrok, which is kind of an open source Salier logic equivalent. So kmatch has started working on this. Kmatch has started working on this and done some really awesome work. And kmatch is in the chat, so everybody say thank you to kmatch. I don't have a handle on Git rebase. I can talk about Git rebase. if you want. So this is a pull request that kmatch just made. It was in the show and tell channel on the Discord as well. But I love this. kmatch has done such a great job. So it says the objective is in an affordable, high quality. The objective says affordable, high quality development boards are now available to many users. Many of these boards have adequate capabilities for use as a logic analyzer, but need the ability to interface with available high quality software that can decode and visualize the signals. This TinyLogicFriend driver is designed to interface Sigrok and PulseView with a wide array of affordable development boards as a logic analyzer. In contrast to most Sigrok drivers, where all devices' capabilities are predefined in the driver, this TinyLogicFriend driver strives to rely on the board to inform the driver about its specific capabilities, pin names, sample rates, triggers, etc. So this is super, super cool because it means that once kmatch gets this merged in, and hopefully they'll be responsive, I've subscribed to the issue. But the idea is that once we get this driver that is not board specific checked into Sigrok, then we can just add TinyLogicFriend firmwares for a bunch of boards that all would then use with that like one same thing. So this is a huge milestone. If we look down, you can see more status update information. And there's even a screenshot of I2C decoding. So one thing I was pushing kmatch to do was like focus on the like super basic case of just like super slow I2C and just making sure that it can capture it. So here's an example of that. And so that's really, really awesome work. So thank you to kmatch for really driving this forward, doing all the work, really. I've just been giving my opinion. So yeah, if somebody wants to test, I don't know if kmatch needs testers, but you could reach out to them as well. So that's super exciting. Yeah, so the idea here is you don't have to buy a new device potentially for being a logic analyzer. You just drag a UF2 of something onto a device and use it. Should be cool. Okay. Super helpful opinions. So this kind of segues into the LED work that I did 3 weeks ago on the stream. So Dan has been redoing USB, which I think is merged in. Yeah, Dan merged it in. So I should advertise this before I talk about this next PR. So one thing we wanted to do for 7.0 is the ability to change the USB device. So in boot.py, where is it? Dynamic USB descriptors. Here we go. The challenge is really compiling sigrok/PulseView. If anyone willing to figure out building that, then I'm eager for testers. Yeah, that's why I'm excited to get it merged in. Because once we could get a release out, that would be really nice. So dynamic USB descriptors is really exciting. We've heard a lot of people recently from the Pico world who are doing like mice and keyboards that they don't want the drive to show up once it works. So what Dan has done is he's added this API that allows you to, and this API is old. Let's not look at that. I don't know if we have a new example. I don't think we have a learn guide yet. So this is all in 7, and 7 is quite hot off the press. But basically in for all of the USB classes, you'll now be able to disable them so that they don't show up in the USB descriptor at all. And then that means going forwards, we could actually support like more types of USB things than you can fit in a descriptor on a particular board. So you'd be able to say like, I want to disable HID but enable MIDI, for example, or enable, like, I'd love to do audio over USB or even video. I think that would be really cool. So Dan's work here allows you to do dynamic USB descriptors. The other thing is that it does allow for dynamic HID descriptors as well. So the couple places that I've heard that is one person, like one of the folks at Tom's Hardware is like on a quest to do controllers for the Nintendo Switch. And that requires a custom HID device. So this would allow them to do that. We haven't figured it out yet, but that's one. The other one is that's the case as well for interfacing with the that's the case for the Xbox adaptive controller as well. So I think that Bill from AT Makers was like keeping his own version of CircuitPython for a while. Deshipu says N-key rollover keyboards too. Yes, N-key rollover keyboards, but also we don't support the boot profile right now. Hi, Simon. So that one is as well. Unexpected Maker asks, what's the limit for how many descriptors you can have? So it's not actually it's not the descriptor limit. What the limit usually is the number of endpoints. And I forget exactly like how many endpoints everything takes. But the limit is usually endpoints. It's basically like hardware FIFOs, is the number of different endpoints. And I forget the details of that, but that's usually what dictates what you can have on and off. The way that this works right now is that if you try to set it up where you use too many endpoints, it will go into safe mode, which is not the greatest thing, but we'll see how it goes. We might have to tweak when that validation happens. But yeah. Dexter asked, is there a summary of USB endpoints / supported by various boards, or do any have USB audio? So I don't know where the summary for the endpoints is. There is a check in the CI now, but I think that might have been removed actually, because yeah, Dan would be a better person to ask. It's definitely like a per chip thing, not really a per board thing. And then your second question, which is, do any have USB audio? So no audio support yet, but I think TinyUSB has audio support in it. Some folks have started adding that. So we use TinyUSB exclusively in CircuitPython. So anything that we want to support in CircuitPython would need to be added there first. So that should be not as hard as some other stuff. But getting things into USB is a right. Neradoc says disabling USB devices allows us to win back USB endpoints to enable new ones. For example, the second serial on small chips with a small amount of endpoints. Right. So briefly in 6.2 we had 2 CDC connections open, and we had some tooling issues on the software or on the host computer side that we hope have gotten fixed since then. We wanted to get 6.2 out without that. So I don't know if it's on by default now. I'd have to take a look. But that'll enable it in 7 again, which people will be excited about. People are talking about AirTags, and I really want to switch over to that, but I haven't finished my thought here. So Dan followed up with build a CircuitPy eraser variant, which is like for every board build a CircuitPython binary that only erases the file system and creates a new one. And I really dislike this. And I told Dan that. So if we look at the comment here, it says, I really don't like this. It has nothing to do with CircuitPython. I'd much rather factor out the useful bits from CircuitPython so that they can be used for other cross-board software. And this is where TinyLogicFriend comes in, is right. Like we have so much data in CircuitPython about the boards, like what flash there are, what pins, how they're mapped. Like I'd love to split that data out of CircuitPython so that anybody can use it in the same way that I did like the NVM TOML stuff. Like we just need a database of this data. And so I was arguing that if we do that, CircuitPython FAT16 support, I think it should work if you have a drive that's big enough, but maybe I'm wrong. I also said it erases all of the file system when all we want to do. So the reason that this is related is that this is probably like trying to think about like if you're doing USB descriptor stuff and you disable the mass storage and the REPL, how do you get it back? How do you recover? So that's where this is coming from, is like what happens when somebody disabled those two things and they want to recover. So that's the context. I haven't even read fully this, but I said it also erases all of the file system when we really just want to disable boot.py, which is where you change the USB descriptor, and code.py to recover from USB miss settings. And this is what safe mode is for, and it's broken. And if it's broken on some boards, then we should fix it, is what I said. So that's the context for this. Yeah, and Dishifu says safe mode. Lucian said, is there a way to force entry to safe mode from the hardware? I've had to build versions of CircuitPython like this for peripheral related bugs triggered by code.py that hang without crashing into safe mode, or occasionally for code that does something like restarting too fast, like a code.py that just calls reset. Yes, there is a way. Ryan says there was talk about faking a larger flash chip to trick formatting into FAT16. I don't think so. The reason we were talking about that was for the Windows flush delay problem, and newer versions of Windows 10 actually have that fixed, I think. Like we actually worked with Microsoft well, somebody at Microsoft did the legwork to find somebody to fix that for us. Because they're like, Windows is not used to having devices that small. That they think they're floppy disks. David says, not sure if it has to be in or out of CircuitPython, but I believe Adafruit should provide a safe UF2 file to restore the board to a working state, or one to test the board outside of user error. If done here, it will benefit all of the non-Adafruit boards too, and every new board will automatically benefit from it. So that's where I want to have a good one, Unexpected Maker. Thanks for checking in. This is what I don't want. Like this is the reason I would like to break the board info out at some point. It's like CircuitPython should not be the only place that benefits from having all of this board information. It's more broadly useful than just CircuitPython, and like we shouldn't put things in CircuitPython just because that's what we need. It doesn't have to be just CircuitPython that has that data. Neradoc says boards without a status LED are an issue. Are there any? So I'll show you what I've done. I've changed it a little bit. There are erase UF2s in the tiny UF2 repo, at least. Yeah, erasing is such a huge, heavy-handed thing. I think safe mode should work on every board. You're right that the Pico is weird, but there's code in safe mode right now to check a boot pin, which is used for the ESP32S2, which could also work for the Pico if we made it work. So what you would do is you would just hit boot in that period, which is not great because pressing that boot button is a bit of a risk, but there is actually circuitry to make it less likely to mess things up. Then there's the nuke UF2, of course. Is it possible for those cases to have a UF2 that just writes some configuration bits that CircuitPython can then read? Like drop this UF2 to start in safe mode and do it again to restore normal behavior. Yeah. Mototuba says, my feather with the crushed status LED. What feather is it, though? Because I was testing on the NRF 52840 feather, and it has both a neopixel and a regular single color LED. And I'm actually, the safe mode code already does this, is that it flashes both the RGB LED and the single color LED. And I'm changing, like 3 weeks ago, we started this LED flashing stuff. And that's what I was doing this morning that I made a lot of progress on. So I'll talk about that as well. But what I'm doing is I'm making, if you don't have an RGB status LED on your board, it'll flash the single color one. Since you have code in the core to deal with LED animation, should there be a Python interface to trigger that from user space? I'm removing it. I'm removing the LED animation stuff. So, Hugo says, but if not just CircuitPython has that board info, that means that anyone could use it. Anyone. Exactly. Like, it's very useful data, and there's no reason it needs to be locked away in CircuitPython. I think, and the argument I was trying to make to Dan was like, I know it's more work right now, but I think like we'll pretty quickly find uses for it. Although that's what I kind of think about the Flash stuff as well, and that hasn't panned out. Like, it's not really used outside of CircuitPython yet, but sometimes things take time. Where are you reading comments besides Discord and YouTube? I'm reading the comments off the pull request. The little one next to the mounting holes lost the battle with standoffs on the Feather M4. Feather M4 has an RGB LED too, I think. Oh, so I never, I read this off and didn't. So Nerodoc pointed out having a UF2 that could flip a configuration bit. I was thinking about that. The only thing that's like, the only data that we have that's reliable is like the flash. And the UF2 stuff can write the flash, but it erases whole sectors, so 4K at a time. So it's not like UF2 can really write like a bit to change something. So that's kind of a bummer. Ryan says, I like the flash tommel. It was great when I'd spent time struggling to add my own chip the week before. Oh, good. I'm glad that made that better. Can a UF2 app do that? You could have a UF2 file that wrote just one 4K block, but then you have to take a whole 4K block to do it. UF2 bootloaders are good at that. They only erase in those 4K blocks, which is what allows the file system to stay alive. Mark says, I got my ADA box. Nice. All right, so let's see. Let me reply to this. I don't think Lucian knows that on most boards, can click reset during a 700 millisecond window at startup to restart into safe mode, which I think is true for the STMs. On the ESP32S2, that's the boot pin may work that way instead. And based on Nerodoc, like we should make Pico do that as well, because that's a good point. Which I don't think we do right now. Bad Abby says, I want to know what's in AdaBox. Send me a personal message. Yeah, no spoilers in the public one. And Neradoc, I know you're in the chat too, but I'll say, like, I don't think, do we have any boards that have no LEDs? Besides the one that got crushed? Oh, I thought UF2 could have apps, like you write them to the OTA partition and run it without screwing up with the bootloader. Oh, the Xiao has no LEDs at all? Only the ESP32S2 has OTA partitions. PiPicos do not have a they do not have an RGB LED, but they do have a single color LED, which we should use for status. And if we don't, then we should. Don't listen to Toddbot. Yeah, so status LED means two different things. Like, it's usually like RGB LED, but also just a regular one. And the blinking to indicate that it's in that it's in that period of safe mode where you can click the button to get into safe mode. That works. That works both with a single color LED and an RGB LED. It's very rare to not have any status LED. And even without it, the safe mode click should work. When a button exists. We should fix the Pico to use the boot cell state. Deshipu says Piu 10 has 64 LEDs but no status LED, and Piu M4 has no LEDs at all. Well, it'll still work. You just won't know when to press the button. Ryan says, I've never had issues getting into safe mode without an LED. There you go. I think it should work. It's in the... I'll even show you... Okay. So, let's take a look at... So what I was doing earlier today, because all this merge stuff is kind of like waiting, I was working on... So 3 weeks ago, I had this task that I wanted to do was... Oh, David says, also need to sell a bag with all the various kinds of key strengths and decide what click we like. You can buy those from Keyboard Source. I have one of those already. And Mototimo says it was the charging LED that got crushed. Deshifu says they also have no reset button, so no problem. All right, well, I can't design every board. Those were decisions you made. I wonder if we should have a flag that just says don't let someone change. Don't let somebody change the USB. Maybe that's what we would need for the, like, here's a board you simply can't recover from. We should just say, like, you can't do this on these boards. All right, let's look at my branches. As always, I'm getting distracted. So, why is it 200? Oh, 2382. Oh, that's right, because I'm not basing on. This number is going to drop We're going to be within like 100 commits behind MicroPython, I think. Nerodog says, can we read the boot cell status though? I know they had to add electronics to be able to read it on the Adafruit 2040 boards. I think you technically can. It just, you have to be careful that the code that does it is not on the flash. So yeah, it's not a simple change because of that, but it would be possible to add. But yeah, that's a good point. A lot of people have Picos. Let's look at this commit. So this is what I was working on 3 weeks ago, where we were talking about like the flash pattern. And in fact, let me just show it off. So I have the overhead going. So the yellow flashing is because there's no battery connected. And under here there's a feather NRF. The same one I was using 3 weeks ago, actually. It's been sitting on my desk blinking away. So the green single flash, for those of you who haven't seen, this is the new way that the status LED will work on CircuitPython with 7 is that it will only blink to get your attention. So when your code is running, it does not do anything. But when your code's not running, like in this case, it will blink every 5 seconds. I think it's 5 seconds. So it blinks green in one blink every 5 seconds if you're in a state where your code's finished, but it finished successfully without error. So if I pull up, so this replaces all of the like, tell me what exception it was and what line number. I deleted all that code. And in fact, I've deleted a lot more code, which I'm very excited about, because there's another axiom or kind of another property of this change, which is we don't change the status LED at all. We don't use it at all while user code is running, which means we can actually deactivate our status LED mechanics completely while user code is running, which means that we don't have to worry about sharing in-use stuff at all, which is very, very cool. I was able to like delete a bunch of stuff, and we'll see when we look at this code, but let's just show how it works. So here's the code.py, which you can't see. So here's the code.py now. It's actually just empty. But what I can do is I can raise an error in it and hit save. And then we get 2 red blinks. So, the way the pattern works is that the blinks happen at the start of the time span. So it's actually quite responsive. So if I hit like save and trigger it and save and trigger it, it actually like it blinks pretty quickly after you write to the file, which is actually really nice. But then if I go here and then it's green again. So it's like, I didn't expect this, and we discovered this 3 weeks ago. It's like, it still feels quite responsive, to me at least, even though there's this like blink and then wait 5 seconds. And the reason that we wanted to switch to that is that if you have a battery powered project and you accidentally get into this mode of like your code's done for some reason, which is where we are, we didn't want to have the LED like constantly on because that would drain your battery. So what we prototyped 3 weeks ago was this flash pattern of like, we want that gap, that 5 second gap to kind of be long enough. It's far enough apart. Sorry, I can make my code bigger. It really just says runtime error. I was just commenting this on out and off. I'll make the other one bigger too. So what it is it's one green flash, and then one green flash if it finishes okay, 2 red flashes if it finishes with an exception, which I'm just raising an exception here. And then it will also do 3 yellow flashes if it's in safe mode. So let me eject, and I will just click into safe mode. Doctor says, this whole save and it happens thing is so cool. Much better than write, compile, upload, wait. Arduino restart. See if it worked, then have to make a change, compile, upload, wait. Oh, what were you looking at the camera view? Yeah. So I'll show you. So what I have here, what you're seeing here is this is LED acrylic. It makes the LED flashing actually like easy to see. And it's actually not that bad there either. So here's it's the Feather NRF Express, and I'm not using the debug stuff at all. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to reset. And what we'll see is that there's a yellow. What's the easiest way? So there's also a single LED here. So if you watch, if I hit reset, oh, you can't. What's the best way for you to see the LEDs? If I hit reset, you see there's this like pattern at the start. That pattern is the, like, you could do safe mode. So you see those, there's yellow flashes when I hit restart. That's if you want to get into safe mode. So if I do that, I watch for the yellow and I hit it. Now I'm in safe mode. And I know because it's going to be doing 3 yellow flashes is safe mode. And see if I put this back on, it makes it easier to see. So there you go. That's safe mode. That's testing 3 safe modes. Ah, Deshipu says Pew Pew M4 has a speaker. I wonder if I could use it instead of a status LED. I think so. I think that would be cool. Because what I did is we had this safe mode flash that also did the single color LED, but I just changed the code so that if you don't have an RGB LED, it will use this the single color LED, and let's just test that. So let's pull up the code here. Uh-oh, I messed up my mouse. I have this like proximity thing. Are the colors for the status LED in a hue that is distinguishable to folks who are colorblind? No, they're not, but the number of blinks is different. Toddbot says put a dab of hot glue on top of your LED as a quickie diffuser. Dexter says having the error messages appear on the TFT featherwing is also way cool. Yeah. Can you raise safe mode? You cannot raise safe mode, but you can reset into safe mode. So yeah, the colors don't actually matter. The colors are kind of a bonus. The number of flashes are what actually matter. So what I wanted to show is that if we pull up, so we're doing a feather NRF. So if I do ports NRF, this is a good test. Boards. Feather NRF 52A40 Express. And then in the .h file, and it's giant. So we'll see that there's this hardware neopixel, but then there's also this hardware LED status. So let's see how the behavior changes if I comment out the neopixel. So we'll rebuild it. And now we've got to do our quick... Oh, it doesn't build. I have a bug. RGB status brightness. All right, let's figure... This is exactly what... Suddenly we're deep diving. I'm going to make this a little smaller so that I can see more. So the bug is in status LEDs. So I've reorganized things. Supervisor, shared, status LEDs, brightness. Oh, interesting. So brightness is different depending on what you have. PWM, full brightness. So what there is now is there's these elifs for the different possible ways of doing a status LED. So neopixel is the first, dot star is the second, RGB PWM is the third, and then lastly, if you just have hardware LED status, it will use that. And this is where we need to say so this we also have RX and TX LED code that I left in there. RGB status, it doesn't matter what this value is. Let's just do FF. So that's what we need. And then basically there's this new status color call, and you give it a color, and it tries to do the color, but at the very end, if it can't do anything, if it's just doing the single color, it just says if the brightness adjusted value is greater than 0, then it turns it on. So that's how it takes code that's written for different colors and just boils it down to on and off. So which is why you also always need to blink a different pattern. But I think that's actually should be really good. And so brightness doesn't actually impact the single color. We could change it to a single PWM, which maybe we should do if we want to be able to change the brightness. But for now, I just did it as an on-off. All right, so we have a new build. And now I gotta... So for those of you new to CircuitPython, here's how you load a new version. So I'm going to hit reset again, but I'm going to hit it even faster than I did for safe mode. And that's going to put me into the bootloader. So this is not a function of CircuitPython. It's a function of the bootloader that's on here, but most boards that run CircuitPython also have this bootloader. So let me see if I can't. Okay, so here's my CircuitPython ports NRF build folder for this feather. And there's a firmware.uf2 that was just built. So it's the one that I just got. So let's just drag that over. And now what we're going to do is we're going to watch. Is that blurry? There we go. So now it's copying over. And now we don't have the status LED, but the red LED here is actually acting as the status LED now. So it's going to be flashing the 2 errors. It'll flash twice for 2 errors. And now if we open it up, hit code.py, comment it out, hit save. Now we just get the 1 flash. It was very blurry. Sorry about that. Do I have a bent pin? Bent pins happen. You bend them back. As in, just treat it as a neopixel and hope that different color data will sound different. It doesn't matter. It works just with beeps now. It doesn't. The color is just for those folks who can actually see color. It's not required. But speaker is actually a great point, and we should do that. Because if we supported speakers, we would work for folks who are unable to see or hard to see. So yeah, I think doing sound would be cool. I'm not going to do it immediately, but I think we could definitely do that here. So that's working, which is great. So we fixed 1 bug, and let's take a look. Let's pull it back up. Too many browser tabs. So let's see how the build is doing. Oh, it hasn't even started. What is running? Yeah, this is on my personal one. It hasn't even run yet, which is unfortunate. You'd think 4 monitors would be good enough. You'd think, right? I only got one, but it's ultra wide. So let's go over. I just want to go over this code. If folks have questions, please ask them. These are kind of like as deep as I'm getting. So here's the changes to main. So I combined, we had this RGB LED status file, and we also had status LEDs for RX and TX LEDs. And so I merged those into the same file. We don't need to reset status LEDs anymore. We don't set a color when main is running, and this is just a found main is only used in this the full build case. When we check for double extensions. And then I retweaked this. Maybe it's easier for me to show this and run code in the regular file. So there's this loop here. So this is in run code.py. This is the thing that runs your file. So it's managing kind of all the things around running the actual file. So it's figuring out what files to do. It sets up like memory and USB, and then maybe run list like runs the file. And then you're done. And you say that like the code is done. So this is all the like the messaging around things running. And so what happens here is after you're done running code.py, what do you do? So here's some things. We might refresh ePaper. So we do this immediately for display IO, but for ePaper where you like are pretty limited in refresh speed, the displays will show any error messages, or it will show that it's done. So that's here. And then this is the LED state stuff. And I don't think, no, we don't need this part. I don't think we need this. I reworked the stuff below. So here's just figuring out, like, based on how the code finished, what to do. So if there's no safe mode and we finished okay, then we just do all done blinks, which is green and 1. Safe mode is yellow and 3, and then exception is 2 and red. And then this is all like timekeeping around it. And then we status LED init here. So this is when user code is not running. So this is what makes me able to delete a bunch of stuff further down, which is if we're going to blink, we just turn on the LED. So we initialize it now. This is when we grab the pins that we need. And then now what we do is we sit in this while true loop waiting for something to happen, whether it's a reload. So this is like, if you save a file, this kicks out, it will get here and kick out of this loop. If you do a control D, this is what you get. This is how you get into the REPL. And then there's more, if you're doing sleeping and you're fake sleeping. So this is if you're on USB, but doing a deep sleep, this is how you wake up. If it's in the state and you connect the USB, we try to wait to tell you that it's done. That's what this is doing. And then there's 2 final states. There's either like, if you can sleep and you exited with this deep sleep state, which is how, when you go into deep sleep in CircuitPython, you finish your code and after your code finishes, it sleeps for you. But we have this delay, so we give USB time to connect. Otherwise it can actually, you can deep sleep. So deep sleep doesn't maintain USB. So if you're not careful, you can actually deep sleep faster than you can connect to USB, which is again the thing that gets you into the state where things don't work. Johnny says, what happens when code is run is that it's displaying some hard work from the Weblate gang. Yeah, all of these messages are all translated, so thank you to the Weblate gang for that. So this is like keeping track of like how far from startup we are. And if we're already fake sleeping, then we just continue to pretend to sleep. If we're not fake sleeping already, that means if we waited long enough to see if USB is connected, then we set the neopixel to black in case it was on, but it won't be on. It won't be on in this case. So we turn the board off, and then depending on if USB is active after this period of time, if it's not, we can actually do real deep sleep, which is like turning everything off. And then pretending to deep sleep is we tell you we're going to pretend to deep sleep, and then we just set this fake sleeping to true. And then it's going to loop around the while true loop, and it'll come back into here. Otherwise, if you're not doing the alarm, here's what happens. And this is the stuff that changed. So we checked if we have longer to wait before we refresh ePaper, then we try to do it. And if it doesn't work, then it returns us a value. It used to be a bool. And then if we don't have a status LED, then we say set an interrupt to wake us up when we can refresh it. Otherwise, if we have a status LED, we get the tick difference. So this is from when the pattern started. And then we say if the start is when we're blinking. So if we're in the start period, figure out which phase of a blink we're in. So just mod it by the blink time. If we're greater than the single blink time, then we know that we're off. And we can sleep until the end of that single blink time. So we can sleep until we want to wake up and turn on again. Otherwise, if we're after the single blink time, or no, if we're less than the single blink time, we set the color to the blink color, and we sleep until we want to turn it off. If we're outside of the blink time, if we've gone over our total time, then we reset and start the pattern over. Otherwise, we sleep until we're going to reset. And then this is just if we have both e-ink and display, we want to sleep the minimum between the two. So if time to next change is that, we set our alarm. This is like a time alarm. And then we idle until an interrupt. So this is the case where like nothing else is happening. We want to make sure and wake up. And then I also switched it. So it used to return straight from this loop. Now it breaks. And the reason it breaks is so that we can do things like set the status color to black. So turn the neopixel or dotstar off, deinit the stuff so it's no longer in use. And then if we were fake sleeping, we also initialize the board again. And then we return based on skip REPL. So that's all new. That's all reorganized code. So if we pull up the browser again, you'll see that like we used to have this RGB animation stuff, which is a weird way to factor stuff out. But I think it's simple enough as is that it's okay. So that's what the diff looks like. And that changes the behavior. And I renamed the init RxTX LEDs. So David asked, what is the blink when waiting for a UF2 file? Is that in TinyUSB? Is it compatible with your new blink? So all of the stuff, yeah. So I'm only changing the blinks once CircuitPython has started. The blinks in the bootloader are up to the specific bootloader. So not really TinyUSB, but TinyUF2 for the new stuff, or the older NRF or SAMD board, bootloaders. Does the Pi Pico work with USB 3? It should. Any way to slow down a crash reset loop? A crash reset loop should still... are you talking about CircuitPython specifically? Because there's a 7. We'll see it here further down. So I changed this variable. So this is, look at all these deletes I did. So let me collapse these as I go through them. 32 files changed. 485 additions, 1,100 deletions. That's what I like to see. So I renamed this. Here's a deletion in bus.io SPI. So SPI used to have to worry about if you were sharing with a dot star, but now that we're not doing any RGB status LED stuff, we don't actually have to worry about sharing anymore. Although I wonder if that's true. If you had the dot star on the display bus, you could have a problem, but I don't think we have anything like that. So here's a bunch more deletes and pins. So this is like, we used to have Boolean variables tracking all of the in-use stuff because the hardware state wasn't reliable. So deleting more of that. So this is all just deleting this in-use stuff. And a rename, and I'm turning it back on. This had a avoid using them to save energy, but now the blinks are different. I think it'll be better to have them on. Another rename, another rename. This is more pin deletions. So I'll just go through that. Pin deletions. So here's supervisor. This is just changing the call to status brightness. E-paper, changing it from a bool to how much time is left. I should probably test that. It compiles though. I turned off, we used to flash on writes, and I turned that off. This is what we simplified last time. All the colors, deleting the file. Safe mode. So this is what, yeah, so Dexter's saying, any way to slow down a crash slash reset loop. You set PWM frequency to 0 in CodePy and it went badly. So this is what safe mode is meant to save you in that case. And what it does is there's actually a 700 millisecond delay. So this is a delay here where we're waiting for a button press. And if that button press occurs, we'll boot into safe mode. And this is code that's shared. It's in supervisor shared safe mode. So it should run on all things. But there's two ways that it works. So again, just like the wait thing, it's actually knitting the LED and then de-knitting it when it's done with it. And so here this is the flash pattern. This like magical statement tells us whether we're on or off. And here you can see here we're setting the color or not. And then we're also checking a boot button. So this is what I was talking about we could improve for the Pico, is that we would want this code here to be able to check the boot cell button on the Pico. So it's kind of, this delay helps two things. One, there's state that it sets earlier. This safe mode data guard, manual safe mode, this sets a flag in memory that should be persistent across resets, such that if a second reset happens when this is set, it will detect it earlier on here. So first it says there's this port get saved word, and then we say, is the reset state right, so if reset state ANDed with the data guard is equal to the data guard. So if if the bits around our state are what we expect as the data card, then we read that value. And so that's what safe mode is. And then we say if safe mode is not safe mode, set the data guard so we'd be out of safe mode next time, and then current safe mode is that, and then we return. So that's how on the second pass. Hi, Dave. That's how the how a reset of the chip gets you into safe mode. This is the same trick that is used to double click into the bootloader, except because the bootloader has a delay, that's why the safe mode delay is slower than the bootloader one. So that's how we get into safe mode via reset. And then we also have this way of doing it via boot, and this was added for the S2, I think. So in this while loop for 700 milliseconds, which is actually ticks, and ticks are slightly smaller than milliseconds, so it's not quite that. We're also checking the value of a particular boot pin, and that will kick us into safe mode as well, into user safe mode in particular, which is slightly different than manual safe mode, I guess. So that's how safe mode should work, and it should work on all boards, although I guess folks are pointing out that if you don't have reset or boot, then you're kind of up a creek. But yeah, the problem with the S2 is the S2 doesn't have a reset button. The reset button doesn't save any state across presses. Is the behavior different when connecting to a computer or powered by a power bank? No, this safe mode stuff is way before USB gets started, so it should be the same regardless. But yeah, so this is the real way I'd like people to recover, and if there are boards that can't do that, then we should figure out how to get that to work. Even if it's just like a separate pin, potentially. But yeah, so that's the change here. Overall, this is looking pretty good. I think I have a couple changes. And then this is just integrating the two together. Oh, look, I have 2 copies of the license. I should get rid of that. It's good to review this file. 2 copies of the same license. 2017. Double license, double safe. We'll even put the new one too. I need to track down a power bank that supports ultra low power draw. Yeah, that can be a problem. Okay, so let's just look at the last remaining bits of this PR, and then I'll send it out and folks can test it. I'm hoping that it builds in all cases. I'm not sure. I think this is okay. I was able to delete some stuff here as well. Oh, it's not detecting that it's a move. It's unfortunate. That's okay. And this one. Pretty simple. Pretty simple. Okay, I'm happy with this. So I'm gonna cheat and let's cancel this. It's not even started. We're not even gonna use it. Let's save some electricity. Let's just make sure that it compiles. Any other questions? Oh, I do have one other thing I could show. I'm just making sure that that still compiles still. Add it. I'm going to be naughty and amend the previous commit. Alvaro, did you want me to talk about rebase? I don't remember when I did it last, but I could. Are there any new? Nope. I think this is all already up to date. Like the last commit is Adafruit main still. All right. Just gonna push a new version. I don't have a lot of other stuff to talk about. I could go over the 14 and 15 merges, but I don't really. They're really not interesting. All right, so I pushed that. I'll make the pull request. How much space do we win? That's a good question. What board do you want to try it out on? Doctor is going to be right back. So NRF Feather, we'll see how much space it is. A tiny one in German. Cutie pie. Okay. I'll do that next. Deshipu says Trinket M0. My numbers are a little weird. I have better numbers than the CI does because Arch Linux does their own copy of the ARM GCC toolchain. And Dan figured out that the library that we link in is on Arch compiled with -os. I've heard git please is used as a proxy for force release. All right, we've got some @mel requests. I think we could do both. We could do Trinket M0 and Trinket M0 translation DE clean. Oops. All right. We'll get this is going to be ideally the larger number. I notice you don't do OS when compiling. Why not? We do OS on the smallest boards. We do O2 on boards that we have space because it runs faster. That was Dave Putz did that. But yeah, we do OS generally. Like for these boards, they're definitely OS. Okay, so this has 3124 bytes. So let's check out Adafruit main. 3124. I'm gonna. You all remember that, okay? So that I'm getting that number from this line. This is how many bytes are used. Here's how many bytes are free in Flash out of this total number of bytes. And the reason this is not 256 is because we use the remainder as the file system. So now let's clean again and rebuild. I love this. I love this computer. Oh, look at that. Holy moly. 1200 bytes? I broke a K. That's good news. So this, on main, we only had 1900 bytes. So we're going to get about a K back, which is exciting. Oh no. Here I am fidgeting with my nail clippers. Alfred asks, just wondering, how do you end up working at Adafruit? Jiminy Cricket, Batman. Nice. So I ended up working at Adafruit. Let me do Cutie Pie. What is the name of the Cutie Pie board? Is it just Cutie Pie? Cutie Pie M0. I worked at Google out of college for 6 years, and then I took a year off, and I did drone hardware, flight controller hardware, and I also ported some open source flight controller software to that hardware. And I was going on Adafruit show and tell. I was watching a lot of Adafruit stuff because I was doing all of the hardware things, so learning how to do tests and things like that. So I was going on show and tell every week to show off the progress I had made. And then kind of like after I got the products done and I was trying to sell them and I wasn't able to sell them. No, like it was well engineered product, but did not have good product market fit is the term for it. And so I went on show and tell and I said, hey, I'm looking for a job. Because I was starting to talk with Google again, and I was talking with Spotify, like looking for a real job, like a 40-hour week, pay me on a regular basis sort of job. So I went on show and tell, and you can find the show and tell if you look back on YouTube. Like it's like early August of 2016. You'll see when I go on there, and Phil had my email, and like the next day I got an email from Phil saying like, hey, we have a project in mind. Are you interested in it? And I said, yeah, yes, please. And I kind of dropped everything I was doing because at that point, like the engineering was done and I was ready to do the more interesting stuff. And, okay, so 2024 is the smaller of the two numbers here. So Phil emailed me to get MicroPython running on the SAMD boards, which Adafruit had already released some SAMD 21 boards at that time. And I actually had one that I won on show and tell. You used to be able to win a product on show and tell back in that time. And so I had like the M0 Bluefruit or something. And I also had an Arduino Zero. And I just jumped right on it. And that was the first project I got. And then after that project went really well, I kind of went to them and was like, look, I'm actually looking for like full-time work. And they said, oh, we don't actually do full-time remote. What we do is we do contractors, but on retainer. So that one only got 800 bytes. I'm getting distracted. So yeah, they put me on retainer at that point. I had already like started my company. So I have an LLC called Chickadee Tech. And I had already like gotten health insurance in the US and because I'm in the US and all that stuff. So I had all of the company stuff set up and I knew how to do the tax side of things. And in fact, taxes got simpler because taxes on real products are really complicated. So yeah, that's kind of how I started. And that's when MicroPython at Adafruit kind of got going. And so that was 2016 in the fall. And we haven't kind of looked back since. We've just gotten more people hired. Maybe the new code for running arbitrary files on reset will now fit. Is that the on next reset stuff? Python looks like the popular programming language at the moment. Yeah, so like this is like MicroPython. Why recovering only 812? I don't know. I don't know what the context is. Or like, yeah, we could dig into it, but I don't really want to. It's Friday. Yeah, whenever we free up space, this is what people think of, like, what can we put in it now? Yeah, I asked Lucian to actually pick up that code because I would like to get it in for 7. It's also our oldest PR. Yeah, and then Neradoc points out that MPY format v5 has reduced the file sizes even more than v4. So that'll come in with no, that's in with 112. We should update the bundle build. Johnny says, so M0 has room for F strings now. Y'all just want to use space. Remember, this number here is higher than what you're going to get in the CI as well. Because this is what Dan is looking at. Or he was. Due to the like GCC library being OS instead of O2 on my builds. As Patrick asked, did you ever talk to the flight test folks on YouTube about your drone work? I did not. I did actually get a review from Oscar Lang, though, I think. It's like one of the drone folks. I was really, by the time I was done with the drone stuff, I was really burnt out on the community. Like, we had a community here in Seattle, and I have a good friend that I got out of it, but it was a bunch of dudes, and they weren't super considerate of other people. And it was kind of like always this, like, going for the best thing, but also a race to the bottom of the cheapest thing as well. And it was just like, as somebody who was trying to sell something that was not cheap and not made in China, it was not cheap. It was tough. And it turned out like the product itself was modular, and modular is actually really expensive. Like the direction flight controllers went at that point and further was like all-in-one boards rather than like modular boards like mine that were just like way more expensive. Bad Abby pointed out the Piunora is almost funded. Yeah, I got, I think I'm going to be sent one. I already funded it, so I'll get one at some point. Ooh, they're close. How much? 4 days left. Yeah, so this is really cool, and this is something I want to do at some point. I want to get CircuitPython running on this. This is an idea that Timon and I had chatting in person at SuperCon, I think. I was pushing this idea that like we need a Raspberry Pi compute module in an Arduino Uno form factor. Really blurring that line between like Raspberry Pi stuff and microcontroller stuff. There's always room in the market to charge more for premium. Yeah, but it actually has to be worth it. For my stuff, I don't think it was actually worth it. You're not encouraging my open source satellite flight controller project. Yeah, well, the like quadcopter racing community is different than the satellite community, I'm sure. But yeah, it should be getting a Piunora at some point. And I have been thinking about revisiting the Raspberry Pi bare metal stuff because I think that would be really cool. But I've got to do this BLE stuff. So what I was going to say is I hope to do start the BLE workflow stuff next week. And if I have time, that's what I'm going to do. Deshipu says I want a Raspberry Pi compute module in the Trinket form factor. It'll happen. It's only a matter of time before things get that small. But yeah, I think the thing I want to do after BLE is I'd like to get CircuitPython running on the Raspberry Pi platform. Because I think being able to making it really easy to display things on a TV would be really cool. Which I've also talked about. So I want to do that at some point. But the BLE workflow stuff's more important. I've been working with Trevor still. And we also are, because Adafruit's starting to kind of pick back up, Adafruit's starting to hire more people, and they have allocated some time to a contractor that they've worked with in the past for iOS and Android development. Antonio is the person who's doing that. So we're going to start working with Antonio, and hopefully that'll make the iOS and the Android side of the BLE workflow stuff go faster. So that should be really cool. We should make progress on that, which means that I have to revisit I need to make it actually native. So that's kind of my next step for the BLE workflow is actually and being in the main file here was really handy for that as well. Oh, we have 10 minutes left. I'll show off something. I know Patrick's in the chat and already saw this, but So I talked about it briefly, I think, last week or the week before. I was working on this law project, which is totally unrelated to CircuitPython or Adafruit. But I did get kind of to the point. Alfred's the second person to ask this. Alfred asks, where does Adafruit post their open jobs? So if you're in New York City and interested in working in like shipping, kitting, manufacturing, testing, you can email pt@adafruit.com, which is not me, but email your resume to them. Otherwise, if you're looking for remote work, it's usually through our community. So start participating. And show and tell is great, and the Discord's great. And that's kind of where we look. I don't know if we're hiring anybody in that role right now, so there's like absolutely no promises for any of this stuff. If there are jobs that we can't find somebody for, that Adafruit can't find somebody for, they'll talk about it on their shows as well. Like there was like a PHP developer for a while that they were looking for. For example, they would talk about that, but generally they don't actually have job postings because a lot of the hiring they do through referrals as well. So like for most folks in New York, they're hired through other people. All right, so this is the law project I think I showed or talked about. Neradoc says, how does that work internationally? Adafruit has remote folks that are international. So they are willing to do that. For like TAC, who does a lot of the tiny USB work, he's in Vietnam. And Antonio, who we're working with, is in Spain. So I think generally international for remote work is okay too. But again, like no promises. We make no promises about hiring. Like it's a relatively recent development that Adafruit's starting to hire people in New York City again. But that's because like they've seen sales pick up, and they need more help shipping stuff out. So no promises, but yeah. They're very, like, there's a number of us that are remote. Like, all the people that do Learn are remote. There's, like, 3 of them. There's, like, John Park, Noah and Pedro. Like, a lot of the people that you see on streams are all remote. And guide authors are remote as well. And some of the support forum folks. I think that might be actually something we may be looking to hire, is if folks are in the support forums. I think there was one person they were adding to add some time there. So that might be a chance too. Okay, so to wrap up, this is not related to any of this. If you have questions, I'll answer those first. So the revised codes of Washington, this is like when laws are codified, it's kind of like somebody's aggregated all the laws that have been passed and kept track of which ones are still active. So that's what codes of law are. I live in the state of Washington, so this is specific to that. But what I have here is I have a project that is meant to make it more obvious what the laws are and how they're going to change. And so this is GitLab, not GitHub. It's an open source competitor, although GitHub is way bigger. But it's like if you wanted to host it yourself or have open source access to it, GitLab is the thing you go for. So this is a version of GitLab that I'm hosting on a like $20 instance at DigitalOcean. So it's going to be quite slow. But it shows the proof of concept. And so all these accounts that you see here are fake in the sense that I made them all. But that's what running my own GitLab gives me, is that like usually GitLab or GitHub charge you per user. But like I'm just trying to mimic a bunch of users. I don't want to actually have to pay per user, because I'm going to make like 150, 200 if I ever get there. So the thing that is really interesting to me is actually the way that we can show how the law will potentially change. So there's two outstanding bills in Washington State for changing the rules around public utilities providing broadband to people, specifically allowing public utility districts to, and for those of you who don't know what that is, that's kind of like the people that will manage and sell like water, sewer, garbage, electricity, that sort of like utility stuff. And so there's two different bills here, and they have different kind of conditions. And the last step to making a law in Washington State and most states is that there's two legislative bodies that amend and approve it, and then once those two agree, then it goes to the governor, which is like the executive. And so that's what these PRs are showing here, or MRs in GIS. They're requesting review requested from Jay Inslee, who's our governor right now. And so what I imported this is it shows that, see, it's slow because it's just like under provisioned, but interesting that this is listed twice. So what you can do here is you can actually see a diff of how the laws will change based on the bill text. So it adds a thing that says a second class city, which is like, so it's title, chapter, section, like however they define a second class city, like it can do broadband stuff is what this does. And then this does the same thing for town. And then this is general provisions for counties. So this allows a county to do it as well. So this is the better of the two bills, in my opinion, because it gives broader authority for people to develop broadband and sell it to consumers. But here you can see like how some sections actually change. And it's interesting, the laws as they're codified in Washington, they actually have a list of like all of the bills that changed it in the past. So it's like get blamed for laws. Kind of funny. And then this is changing like how port districts can do it. And the last one is public utility districts. So public utility districts can do it as well. And then also there's 4 different revisions of the bill from what Drew initially like offered up, and then when a bill is substituted if a committee changes it. It's engrossed when like the chamber itself modifies it, and then bill as passes the legislature is if the other the other body changes it as well. So you can also click into this and see like how it not a diff from the current laws, but a diff for how the laws evolved just in that time. So yeah, this is kind of was my side project for more government transparency. And if we could look at the other bill. The next step on this project is kind of like to get over the hump in terms of like I've got the Git commits pretty well done now, but what I don't have is like integrating all of the like mechanics around bills, like committee review and stuff into like the history that like GitLab would show, like all the notes on the merge request is kind of like the next thing I would do. But I don't know if I'll do that. We'll see. There's no rush because we just all the laws are basically done being made for the year, except we're waiting for the governor to make decisions, but the legislature itself is done for the year. But here's the other one, and this is the competing one, and you can see here that it doesn't do anything for towns, counties, or second-class cities. So it's the inferior one, in my opinion. There is the only other thing about, for those of you in the US at least, a common thing for broadband legislation is this idea of defining underserved areas. So like it specifies like a minimum upload and download speed as like because one of the ways they incentivize, here's unserved areas, 100 up, 20 down. There's an argument, a common argument around broadband policy in the US at least is whether like cities and counties incentivize private companies to build out by providing them local monopolies. And the problem with that is that it excludes competition. So it could allow somebody who's in an existing area to prevent another company from coming in and building probably better stuff. So like this number actually matters a lot. Thanks, Dave. This number matters a lot because it kind of like it's the metric, and I think this bill had it and they removed it, but which is good. I think it's hard to see, but it basically allows like the person who is already there to like veto anybody else from doing it, which is a huge problem. But that's what these unserved or underserved metrics are usually about, is like if an existing provider is there but they can't argue that they're doing this, then that's a problem. And like that doesn't give them the ability to like veto anybody else from coming into the area. So 100 down and 20 up. What does Starlink get? It's only a few hundred up and down, I think. But the numbers here have a pretty big influence about what technologies are able to do it. So like these numbers here are within the range of what you could achieve arguably with either cable. Like cable can go up to a gig or two if it's the newest version of cable internet. But like wireless may have trouble getting to those higher speeds. So the number here matters a lot in terms of fiber deployment, which is what I'm like all about. Like people should have fiber everywhere, because wires are always going to be better than wireless. Linux 203 says, not sure if it's still true, but AT&T used to claim anything over 56K was broadband. So defining broadband is cool. Yeah, so the older definition of broadband was the previous one. I think it was 25 megabits down and 3 up. So there is a revision. There was a revision on the other bill that moved it from 25.3 to 120. But I think a lot of people would argue that's still not enough, because the belief is that fiber investment is really where the money should go, because fiber has this awesome property where the fiber itself usually applies to multiple generations of the hardware, the electronics on either end of the fiber, which means that you don't have to change the cables to get faster speeds, and fiber can go real fast. Like the newest version of fiber is like 10 gigabits symmetric. 10 gigabits symmetric. Yeah, so by this, less than 120 is underserved. I feel really at odds with that, as we have 50-25 and 50-50 at our 2 locations, and it's 100% meets our needs, even with live media streaming. 25 down is enough for 4K streaming. So I think where you get really into the high speeds is actually concurrent people in the same household. Like one person 4K streaming may be okay with 25, but what if you had 3 people or 4 people doing 4K streaming? And then the other thing is like, really, what in practice does that get you? Like investing in wireless hardware is actually like not as future proof, I think. From the podcast that I listen to, they believe that investing in wireless is like not worth it compared to investing in fiber. The worst part is that there's a program called the Emergency Broadband Benefit, EBB, that was passed in the first of the bills in the U.S. here, and the EBB allows low-income folks to just basically get subsidized internet. And that's great in the short term, but it's basically paying providers for what they have existing. Whereas I think a lot of the hope is that the subsidies or the money that we get for broadband from the like jobs plan goes into like physical things, like actually laying fiber and things like that. Anecdata says there's no cable or fiber where I am. AT&T won't even do new DSL installs. Hamslab says I'm in a zip codes which is among the lowest medium income zip in New York State, and there is a company building out fiber and offering it inexpensively. It should be turned on sometime in the summer. Lots of refugees entering from Canada land in my neighborhood. Interesting. So I'd be curious what company is building out the fiber. Mr. Certainly is 100% for wired fiber instead of wireless. Linux 203 says, I have 6 users at my house, all consume streaming media concurrently. Yeah, what internet do you have with that? Aren't we getting our personal 5G hotspots with our vaccine? No, you're not. Oh, there was a question about doing this in other states. Bad Abby said, how much effort would it be to expand this to other states? I think a lot of effort. Greenlight Networks. Nice. I think I recognize that name actually from these podcasts I've been listening to. Sounds like you could get... It sounds like you're in a good area, which is awesome. Yeah, so the GitLab side of this might be useful for other states, but like all the data that I'm pulling in from Washington State is all in some custom system. Right. 5G will actually drive 10 gigabit fiber because the cell towers need a lot of bandwidth. Yep. Right. That's another thing that comes up is like some provider, like they just had, I've been listening to, it's like community broadband bits. They just had some people from Colorado where they talked about like to get faster internet to folks, they do wireless first. They run fiber to the towers, and anybody along that route can get fiber to their house as well. But then like the people off that route can just get like faster wireless then. I'm looking forward to using up my monthly cell data in one day. Nice. Yeah, so there's definitely like a movement for better broadband. Like the pandemic really showed that the US is quite underserved generally for that. And if folks are looking for a project, I was talking with the person who, let me move this off the screen, but the podcast I listened to come from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. And I started following the guy, Chris Mitchell, who does that. And we had kind of a back and forth. There's a need for an open source map in the US of where different technologies are used for internet access. Let's see. Yeah, so that was one thing I was like, oh, maybe I'll take a stab at that. Because that's one of the questions providers have is like, where should we go to give people better internet? Yeah, so if folks want to follow community nets here, there's all sorts of words. City of 3,300 couldn't get 25.3 from the big companies, but they couldn't apply for grants because they lied about the service. That's one thing actually that's nice about this Washington law is that it's saying that a minimum bandwidth versus, yeah, import it into OpenStreetMaps and let it become community maintained. Yeah, I was thinking about that. One thing I was thinking is poll availability, whether utilities are on polls or not, could be something that OpenStreetMap could map. Because digging underground is a lot more expensive. Yeah, so community nets, and then they talk about the podcast on here too. If you're interested in broadband policy, I'd recommend taking a look at that. Good night, Dishipu. All right, let's wrap up. The FCC doesn't have a map showing speeds. A lot of it's private. If you find the conversation I had with Chris, he was like, he pointed to a podcast that was from last month, April, where they talk about the fact that a lot of the maps that the FCC funds are not publicly available. Cable speed keeps going up here. I think I could download about 150 megabytes all day. Megabits? Remote education with a laptop or tablet really showed the disparity. Four or five different languages for vaccination. That's amazing. Is the show still live? It's only for a little bit longer. There is an FCC thing for doing a speed test. Ooh. But Patrick, is that data open? I don't think it is. It'd be nice to figure out where fiber was and where it's not. Even if people have a wire, sometimes it could be over a wireless link in between. Libra speed. Yeah, so there are lots of disparate data sets, but there's no, it's open as you're willing to pay for it. Yeah. Yeah, so there are some disparate data sets, but like I don't think anybody's aggregated them together. All right, let's wrap it up. I'm calling it. Thank you all again for joining me on yet another deep dive. We've wrapped up the merges, or the merges will wrap up next week, but not a whole lot of work left there. Support the Piunora. I just had it up. If you're interested in this weird world between the Raspberry Pi world and the microcontroller world, the Piunora is going to be really interesting for that. The LED stuff is sent out, which is good. Thanks again to kmatch for the TinyLogicFriend. Reach out to kmatch if you want to help with that. Also, thank you again to David, DCD, for doing time codes. I really appreciate it every week. And then busy week next week for me doing PyCon stuff. I'll cover that on Friday, talk all about it. But then hopefully get all the merge commits in. That would be a good goal. And then the LED stuff in, and then once that's in, I'll be back on BLE workflow. So yeah, that's where we're at. If you want to support me and support Adafruit by going to adafruit.com, purchasing hardware there. If stuff's not in stock, sorry about that. There's lots of chip shortages and things. If you want to keep talking with us all week long, please join our Discord server. The Adafruit Discord server by going to the URL adafru.it/discord. That's where I am during the week, and lots of other people are as well. And I think that's it. Thanks again, and we'll see you all next week on Friday. Oh, and I should pet the cat, like I always do. You want some pets? Kitty, kitty, kitty. All right, have a great weekend, everyone.